Sarah Martinez grew up in a small farming town in Texas where guns were as common as pickup trucks. Her father owned a hunting shop, and by age 12, she could field strip a rifle faster than most adults. But despite her natural talent with firearms, nobody expected the petite 22-year-old to walk into the Marine Corps recruiting office on a sweltering August morning. The recruiter, Staff Sergeant Williams, looked up from his paperwork and tried to hide his surprise. Sarah stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. Her long brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her soft-spoken manner made her seem more suited for a library than a battlefield. "What can I do for you, miss?" Williams asked, setting down his pen. "I want to be a Marine," Sarah said quietly but firmly. "Specifically, I want to be a sniper." Williams had heard it all before. Young people walked through his door every week with dreams of glory and action movies playing in their heads. But something about Sarah's calm determination made him take a second look. Her application showed impressive marksmanship scores from civilian competitions, and her background check came back spotless. Boot camp at Paris Island was everything Sarah expected, and worse. The South Carolina heat was brutal, and the drill instructors showed no mercy to anyone, especially not to a small woman who claimed she wanted one of the most demanding jobs in the Corps. Drill instructor Rodriguez made it his personal mission to break her spirit. "Martinez, you think you're going to be a sniper?" He would scream inches from her face. "You can't even carry a full pack without falling behind. What makes you think you can handle a Barrett 50 cal?" The other recruits watched as Sarah endured push-ups in the mud, extra guard duty, and constant verbal attacks. Many of them started to believe the drill instructors were right. How could someone so small handle the massive Barrett M82 rifle, which weighed nearly 30 pounds and fired bullets the size of small missiles? But Sarah never complained or asked for special treatment. During weapons training, she consistently scored expert on every rifle they gave her. When they ran the obstacle course, she might have been slower than the men, but she never quit. At night, while others slept, she studied sniper manuals she had borrowed from the base library. The first real test came during a combat simulation exercise. Sarah's unit was tasked with securing a mock village while enemy forces attempted to flank them. She had been assigned as a designated marksman with a standard M16 rifle. But the scenario quickly went sideways when their actual sniper was killed by opposing forces. The exercise controller approached Sarah's squad leader. "You need to get someone up on that ridge to provide overwatch. Without sniper support, your whole unit is going to get wiped out." Sergeant Jackson looked around at his Marines. The only other candidate was Private Morrison, a big guy from Montana who bragged constantly about his hunting experience. But Morrison had been struggling with his marksmanship scores lately, and Jackson had noticed that Sarah consistently outshot everyone in the company. "Martinez, grab the long rifle and get up that hill," Jackson ordered. Sarah picked up the M40, a 5 sniper rifle, and its accompanying equipment. The weapon was heavier than what she was used to, but it felt familiar in her hands. She had practiced with similar rifles back home, though never in a high-pressure situation like this. The climb up the rocky ridge was exhausting with all the extra gear, but Sarah pushed through the burning in her legs and lungs. At the top, she found a good position, with clear sight lines over the entire training area. Through her scope, she could see the opposing force moving to surround her unit below. The first shot was the hardest. Sarah controlled her breathing just like her father had taught her years ago while hunting deer in the Texas Hill Country. She squeezed the trigger slowly, and the rifle bucked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she watched the red smoke grenade explode on the target, indicating a hit. One by one, she picked off the enemy forces that were trying to flank her unit. Each shot had to count, because repositioning with the heavy rifle would give away her location. The exercise controllers were impressed by her precision and tactical thinking. When the simulation ended, word spread quickly through the base about the small woman who had saved her entire unit with accurate long-range fire. But not everyone was convinced. Many of the male Marines still believed it was just beginner's luck. Master Gunnery Sergeant Patterson had been running sniper training for 15 years. He had seen hundreds of Marines come through his course, and only the best made it to graduation. When Sarah's application for Scout Sniper School crossed his desk, he almost threw it in the trash. "Another one who thinks she can handle it," he muttered to his assistant instructor. "Send her the standard rejection letter." But then he saw her marksmanship scores from the simulation exercise. Every shot had been a confirmed kill at ranges over 600 meters. Patterson had trained snipers who would have been proud of those numbers. Against his better judgment, he approved her application. Scout Sniper School was designed to push Marines beyond their physical and mental limits. The course lasted several months and had a failure rate of over 60%. Students learned advanced marksmanship, fieldcraft, observation techniques, and mission planning. But the biggest challenge was simply carrying the equipment. On the first day, Patterson lined up all the students in front of a table covered with sniper rifles. There were precision weapons from around the world, but sitting at the end like a sleeping giant was the Barrett M82A 150 caliber rifle. "This is what separates the men from the boys," Patterson announced, picking up the massive weapon. "The Barrett 50 cal can punch through engine blocks and take down helicopters, but it weighs 28 pounds empty and kicks like an angry mule. Most of you will never be strong enough to use it effectively in the field." His eyes stopped on Sarah, who was studying the rifle intently. "Martinez, since you're so eager to be here, why don't you show the class how it's done?" Sarah stepped forward and lifted the Barrett with both hands. It was heavier than anything she had ever fired, but she managed to bring it to her shoulder without showing strain. The other students watched skeptically as she settled into a prone firing position. "The target is 800 meters, Patterson said, handing her a single round. "One shot to show us what you've got." Sarah loaded the massive cartridge and looked through the scope. The target seemed impossibly small at that distance. She controlled her breathing and squeezed the trigger slowly. The rifle's recoil was tremendous, driving her back several inches. But she maintained her sight picture. Downrange, the target exploded in a cloud of dust and debris. A perfect center hit. Patterson raised his eyebrows but said nothing. One good shot didn't make a sniper. Over the following weeks, he would test Sarah in every way possible. She would have to prove that her success wasn't just luck, but the result of genuine skill and determination that could be relied upon when lives were on the line. The real test was just beginning. The weeks that followed at Scout Sniper School tested every aspect of Sarah's abilities. Master Gunnery Sergeant Patterson designed increasingly difficult challenges, watching for any sign that she might crack under pressure. While other students struggled with the academic portions, Sarah excelled at calculating bullet drop, wind drift, and atmospheric conditions. The physical demands were where most people expected her to fail. Daily runs with full gear, long crawls through mud and brush, and hours spent motionless in uncomfortable positions took their toll on everyone. But Sarah's smaller frame actually became an advantage. She could hide in spaces where larger Marines couldn't fit, and her lower body weight allowed her to move more quietly through dense vegetation. Private First Class Johnson, a former college football player from Alabama, made no secret of his opinion about Sarah's presence in the course. "This isn't a game," he told other students during field exercises. "When we deploy, we need people who can carry their weight. How's she going to haul a 50 cal up a mountain?" His answer came during a grueling field training exercise designed to simulate real combat conditions. Each team of 2 students was given a mission to reach an observation point 15 miles away, establish a hide, and report enemy movements for 72 hours. They would carry everything they needed on their backs, including the Barrett rifle and enough ammunition for multiple engagements. Sarah was partnered with Corporal Davis, a quiet Marine from Oregon, who had initially shared Johnson's doubts, but was beginning to change his mind after watching her consistent performance. As they prepared their equipment, Davis watched Sarah efficiently pack her gear and carefully inspect every piece of the Barrett rifle. "You sure you can handle this?" Davis asked, not unkindly. "It's a long way, with a lot of weight." Sarah adjusted her pack straps and picked up the massive rifle. "I've been carrying heavy loads since I was 12, she said. "My dad used to make me pack out deer twice my size. This is just a really expensive hunting trip." The first part of their movement was through relatively easy terrain, but as they climbed into the mountains, the going got progressively tougher. Other teams started to spread out, as different students moved at their own pace. Sarah found a steady rhythm and maintained it for hours, never complaining or asking for rest stops that weren't already scheduled. Johnson's team was ahead of them on the trail, but Davis noticed they were stopping frequently. Johnson was struggling with the weight of his equipment, and his partner was getting frustrated with their slow progress. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her methodical pace up the mountain, the Barrett rifle secured across her back. By the second day, several teams had been forced to call for extraction due to injuries or equipment failures. The remaining students pressed on through rain and cold temperatures that made every task more difficult. Sarah and Davis reached their assigned observation point on schedule and began constructing their hide site. The hide was essentially a camouflaged burrow where they would spend the next 3 days watching for enemy activity. Sarah demonstrated skills her instructors hadn't expected, using natural materials to create concealment that was nearly invisible even from close range. Her smaller size allowed her to create a more compact position that was harder to detect. On the third morning, their mission scenario escalated. Radio chatter indicated that a high-value enemy target would be moving through their sector. This was the culmination of the exercise, a chance to demonstrate their skills under the most realistic conditions possible. Through her spotting scope, Sarah identified movement on a distant ridgeline almost 2 miles away. Using her rangefinder and wind meter, she calculated that the target was at extreme range for the Barrett rifle. Most snipers would never attempt a shot at that distance under field conditions. Range to target is 1,847 meters, she whispered to Davis, who was acting as her spotter. Wind is variable, 3 to 7 miles per hour from the northwest. Davis did his own calculations and frowned. That's outside effective range for most shooters. Are you sure about this? Sarah studied the target through her scope, noting the terrain features and atmospheric conditions. The shot would require perfect technique and a little bit of luck. She had made similar shots during training, but never under these conditions with an observer recording everything for evaluation. The target appeared in her scope, a figure moving across an open area that would provide only a few seconds of opportunity. Sarah controlled her breathing and settled the crosshairs on the distant silhouette. She squeezed the trigger slowly, and the Barrett roared. The massive rifle's recoil pushed her back, but she immediately returned to the scope to observe her shot. Seconds passed as the bullet traveled its arcing path through the morning air. Then they saw it. The target dropped immediately, indicating a direct hit. Davis stared through his spotting scope in amazement. Holy shit, Martinez. That was an incredible shot. The radio crackled with confirmation from the exercise controllers. Not only had Sarah hit her target, but she had made what they confirmed was the longest successful shot of the entire training exercise. Word spread quickly among the instructors that the small woman everyone had doubted had just demonstrated skills that most Marines would never achieve. When they returned to base, Patterson was waiting with Sarah's complete performance evaluation. She had scored highest in her class on written examinations, excelled in fieldcraft, and now held the record for longest successful engagement during training. But the master gunner was not ready to admit he had been wrong about her capabilities. One good shot doesn't make you a sniper, Martinez, he said gruffly. Let's see how you handle yourself when people are actually shooting back. Sarah's opportunity came sooner than expected. Intelligence reports indicated increased enemy activity in a remote valley where coalition forces were conducting operations. A small reconnaissance team needed sniper support for a dangerous mission to capture a high-ranking enemy commander. The assignment required someone who could operate independently for extended periods and make difficult shots under pressure. 3 qualified snipers volunteered for the mission, including Sarah and Johnson, who had finally graduated from the course but still questioned whether a woman belonged in combat. The final selection would be based on a comprehensive evaluation that included marksmanship, physical fitness, and psychological assessment. The marksmanship test was conducted on a range that simulated real combat conditions. Targets appeared at various distances and remained visible for only brief periods. Shooters had to engage multiple targets quickly while moving between firing positions. Sarah's performance was flawless. Every shot found its mark, and she completed the course faster than any of the male candidates. Johnson's frustration was obvious. "This is bullshit," he muttered to another Marine. "She gets lucky a few times and suddenly she's better than everyone else? Wait until she has to hump that rifle 20 miles through the desert." The physical fitness evaluation included a forced march with full combat equipment and the Barrett rifle. Each candidate had to cover 12 miles of rough terrain within a specified time limit while carrying over 60 pounds of gear. Sarah knew this was where her critics expected her to fail. She started the march at a conservative pace, saving her energy for the difficult terrain ahead. Johnson bolted out of the starting point, clearly trying to make a statement about his superior strength and endurance. Other candidates settled into their own rhythms, focused on completing the grueling test. By the halfway point, Johnson's aggressive pace had backfired. He was visibly struggling with fatigue and had fallen behind several other candidates. Sarah maintained her steady approach, moving efficiently over the rocky ground and steep climbs. Her smaller frame required less energy to cover the same distance, and her careful pacing allowed her to maintain her speed throughout the march. Sarah crossed the finish line third out of 8 candidates, well within the time limit and showing no signs of the exhaustion that affected most of the others. Johnson finished dead last, over an hour behind the leaders, and required medical attention for heat exhaustion. The psychological evaluation was the final component designed to test mental toughness and decision-making ability under stress. Candidates were placed in high-pressure scenarios and evaluated on their responses to unexpected challenges and moral dilemmas. Sarah's performance impressed the evaluation team with her calm decision-making and clear thinking under pressure. When presented with complex tactical situations, she demonstrated an intuitive understanding of battlefield dynamics that couldn't be taught in any classroom. Her quiet confidence and analytical approach stood in sharp contrast to some of the more aggressive personalities who relied primarily on physical intimidation. When all evaluations were complete, Sarah had earned the highest overall score. She would be assigned to the reconnaissance mission as the primary sniper, responsible for providing overwatch and long-range precision fire support. It would be her first deployment to a combat zone, and the real test of whether all her training had prepared her for the ultimate challenge. The mission briefing revealed the complexity of what lay ahead. The target was a well-protected compound in difficult terrain, surrounded by experienced enemy fighters who knew the area intimately. Success would require not just marksmanship skills, but tactical intelligence, patience, and the ability to make split-second decisions that could determine whether her teammates lived or died. As Sarah packed her equipment for deployment, she reflected on how far she had come from that day in the recruiting office. But she knew the hardest part was still ahead. Combat was different from any training scenario, and she would soon learn whether she truly belonged among the elite ranks of military snipers. The helicopter touched down in the pre-dawn darkness of the Afghan mountains, its rotors kicking up clouds of dust that made everyone squint and cover their faces. Sarah was the first to jump out, her Barrett rifle case strapped securely to her back, along with enough ammunition and equipment to sustain her for a week of independent operations. Captain Torres, the team leader, gathered his 8-man reconnaissance unit in a tight circle. "Remember, we're here to capture or eliminate a high-value target who's been coordinating attacks against coalition forces. Intelligence says he'll be at this compound for only 48 hours before moving to another location." Torres looked directly at Sarah. "Martinez, you'll establish an overwatch position on the ridge overlooking the target area. We need you to provide security for our approach and be ready for long-range engagement if the situation goes sideways." The team moved out immediately, using night vision equipment to navigate the treacherous mountain terrain. Sarah's position was nearly 3 miles from the target compound, requiring a difficult climb over loose rock and through areas with minimal concealment. She would make the journey alone, while the rest of the team approached from a different direction. As Sarah climbed through the darkness, she reflected on all the training that had led to this moment. Every doubt expressed by her instructors, every skeptical comment from fellow Marines, and every physical challenge that was supposed to prove she couldn't handle the job. Now she was carrying a 30-pound rifle up a mountain in enemy territory, trusted with the lives of her teammates. The climb took 4 hours of careful movement over terrain that would be dangerous even in daylight. Sarah's smaller size became an advantage, as she squeezed through narrow passages between rocks and moved silently over ground that would challenge larger Marines. By the time she reached her planned position, the first hint of dawn was appearing on the horizon. Sarah spent an hour carefully constructing her hide, using local rocks and vegetation to create a position that was virtually invisible from below. The Barrett rifle was assembled and tested, with each component checked multiple times. Through her high-powered scope, she could see the target compound clearly, a collection of buildings surrounded by defensive walls and guard positions. The compound was more heavily defended than intelligence reports had indicated. Sarah counted at least 12 armed guards, plus an unknown number inside the buildings. The terrain around the target offered minimal cover for an assault team, making her overwatch position critical for mission success. As the morning progressed, Sarah observed the daily routine of the compound's inhabitants. Guards changed positions every 2 hours, sentries walked predictable patrol routes, and there was significant activity around what appeared to be a command building in the center of the complex. She radioed detailed observations to Captain Torres, who was positioning his team for the assault. At 1,400 hours, everything changed. A convoy of vehicles approached the compound from the south, carrying what appeared to be high-ranking enemy commanders. Through her scope, Sarah identified the primary target, a man matching the description of the commander they had come to capture. "Overwatch to Alpha Team," Sarah whispered into her radio. "Primary target is on site. Building 2, northwest corner. Multiple security personnel, including what appears to be a specialist protection detail." Torres acknowledged her report and began moving his team into assault positions. The plan was for them to approach under cover of darkness that evening, but the arrival of additional enemy forces complicated everything. Sarah continued her surveillance, noting defensive positions and identifying potential threats to her team's approach. At 1,630 hours, disaster struck. One of the enemy patrols discovered signs of the reconnaissance team's movement and raised an alarm throughout the compound. Within minutes, armed fighters were spreading out from the buildings to search for intruders. Sarah watched through her scope as muzzle flashes erupted from multiple locations. Her teammates were under attack. "Alpha Team under fire! Alpha Team under fire!" Torres's voice crackled over the radio. "Overwatch. We need immediate support." Sarah could see the tactical situation developing below her. Her teammates were pinned down in a rocky depression about 800 meters from the compound, taking heavy fire from multiple directions. Enemy fighters were moving to flank their position, and more were pouring out of the buildings to join the fight. Through her scope, Sarah identified the most immediate threats. An enemy machine gun position was raking her team's cover with automatic fire, making it impossible for them to move or return effective fire. The gunner was positioned behind sandbags at a range of 1,150 meters. A difficult shot, but well within the Barrett's capabilities. Sarah controlled her breathing and settled the crosshairs on the machine gunner. The wind was gusty and variable, requiring her to make quick adjustments based on visual cues from blowing dust and vegetation. She squeezed the trigger slowly, and the Barrett roared across the valley. The massive bullet struck the machine gunner's center mass, immediately silencing the weapon that had been pinning down her teammates. But there was no time to celebrate. More targets were presenting themselves as enemy fighters exposed their positions while maneuvering against the reconnaissance team. Over the next 20 minutes, Sarah systematically eliminated 7 enemy fighters with precision shots that ranged from 800 to over 1,400 meters. Each engagement required split-second decisions about target priority and complex calculations for wind and distance. The Barrett rifle performed flawlessly, and Sarah's training allowed her to operate with deadly efficiency. "Outstanding shooting, Overwatch," Torres radioed during a brief lull in the fighting. "You've given us room to maneuver. We're going to try to reach the primary target." But the situation was about to get worse. Sarah observed a group of enemy fighters moving toward her teammates' position with what appeared to be rocket-propelled grenades. If those weapons reached effective range, they would devastate the lightly protected reconnaissance team. The enemy weapons team was moving along a trail that would keep them mostly concealed from direct fire until they reached an optimal launch position. Sarah realized she would have only one opportunity to engage them before they could bring their devastating weapons to bear against her teammates. The shot would be the most difficult of her career. The targets were moving at a range of 1,580 meters, and she would have to lead them significantly to account for their movement and the bullet's flight time. Wind conditions were deteriorating as afternoon thermals created unpredictable air currents throughout the valley. Sarah tracked the moving targets through her scope, calculating their speed and direction. She had practiced shots like this hundreds of times during training, but never under combat conditions, with lives hanging in the balance. There would be no second chance. Missing would allow the enemy to devastate her teammates with RPG fire. She led the target by what felt like an enormous margin, trusting her instincts and training. The Barrett bucked against her shoulder, and she immediately returned to her scope to observe the shot. The bullet's flight time seemed eternal as it arced across the valley toward the moving targets. The impact was devastating. The heavy bullet struck the lead fighter carrying an RPG, and the subsequent explosion destroyed the entire weapons team. Secondary explosions from their ammunition created a spectacular fireball that could be seen for miles across the valley. The psychological impact on the remaining enemy fighters was immediate and dramatic. They had watched their comrades being picked off one by an invisible sniper, and the destruction of the weapons team broke their will to continue the fight. Many began withdrawing toward the compound's buildings, seeking cover from the deadly, accurate fire. Captain Torres seized the opportunity created by Sarah's precision shooting. All Alpha Team elements, advance to Phase Line Bravo. Overwatch has cleared the approach route. The reconnaissance team moved quickly toward the compound, while Sarah continued to provide covering fire. Her elevated position allowed her to observe enemy movements that her teammates couldn't see from ground level, and she directed their advance around remaining threats. The final phase of the mission required Sarah to make perhaps her most difficult shot of the day. The primary target was attempting to escape in a vehicle, driving erratically to avoid possible sniper fire. The range was extreme, over 1,600 meters, and the target was moving at high speed along a winding road. Sarah had one chance to stop the vehicle before it reached dead ground, where the terrain would mask it from her position. She tracked the speeding vehicle through her scope, noting its pattern of movement and estimating where it would be when her bullet arrived. The shot required her to aim at what seemed like empty road, trusting that her calculations were correct and that the vehicle would drive into her bullet's path. It was an almost impossible shot that few snipers in the world would attempt under such conditions. Sarah fired, and the Barrett's massive recoil drove her back in the hide. Through her scope, she watched the vehicle continue for several seconds before suddenly swerving off the road and crashing into a rocky outcrop. The heavy bullet had shattered the engine block, disabling the vehicle and trapping the occupants. Within an hour, the primary target was in custody, and the reconnaissance team was preparing for extraction. The mission had been a complete success, with no friendly casualties and the high-value target captured alive for interrogation. As Sarah disassembled her rifle and prepared to move to the extraction point, Captain Torres's voice came over the radio. "Overwatch. That was some of the finest shooting I've ever seen. You saved this entire mission and probably all our lives." Word of Sarah's performance spread rapidly through the military community. She had made 11 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 800 meters, including several shots that were considered nearly impossible under combat conditions. The mission video footage would later be used in sniper training programs as an example of precision shooting under pressure. Master Gunnery Sergeant Patterson, who had initially tried to reject her application for sniper school, personally recommended Sarah for promotion and assignment to the Marine Corps' most elite reconnaissance units. The same instructors who had once doubted her capabilities now pointed to her record as proof that determination and skill mattered more than physical size or gender. Johnson, the former football player who had consistently questioned her abilities, approached Sarah during the post-mission debriefing. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I was wrong about everything. That was the most impressive shooting I've ever seen." Sarah accepted his apology graciously, but she had never been motivated by proving her critics wrong. From the beginning, her goal had been simply to serve her country to the best of her abilities and to honor the trust placed in her by her teammates. In the years that followed, Sarah would complete multiple combat deployments and establish herself as one of the most skilled snipers in military history. Her record included over 40 confirmed kills at extreme ranges, several successful hostage rescue operations, and countless missions where her precision fire support saved the lives of fellow Marines. The small-town girl from Texas, who had once been told she couldn't handle the Barrett .50 caliber rifle, had become living proof that courage, determination, and skill recognize no boundaries of gender or physical size. Her legacy would inspire a new generation of female Marines to pursue roles in combat specialties that had previously been closed to them. Sarah Martinez had silenced not just enemy fighters with her remarkable shooting, but also the voices of doubt that said she couldn't succeed in one of the military's most demanding professions. Through her actions in the mountains of Afghanistan and beyond, she had proven that true strength comes not from physical size, but from the determination to excel regardless of the obstacles placed in your path.